Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Gather round bookworms because the time has come for a new episode of Rock and Read. Today we'll read chapter 13 of It's So Easy and Otherwise by Duff McKagan. Chapter 13 is called Welcome to the Jungle. Jumanji! Strength? Strength is my weakness? Anyway, let's find out what happens in chapter 13. In 1985, AIDS was definitely starting to enter the national dialogue, but it didn't yet occupy a prominent place in the heterosexual psyche. I never used a condom, not once. I was lucky. The scene in Hollywood was shared needles and shared girlfriends and boyfriends. Perhaps there had been no other time in recent history when the doors were so wide open. Everyone seemed to be living in and for the moment, and it seemed as if nothing was off limits. Our Gardner storage space was at the epicenter of all that, the place where the members of Guns N' Roses lived our reckless lives. 3 of my bandmates were using heroin at least occasionally by this point, and Izzy was continuing to deal, but everybody put in the work. Even then, though, the singer's personal issues were beginning to affect the band in a way that drug habits were not, at least not yet. Axl had intense emotional swings marked by periods of incredible energy, followed by days on end where he would be overtaken by black moods and disappear and miss rehearsals. Since I had suffered from panic attacks since I was 17, I knew all too well how crippling things like that could be. Axl and I talked together about it once in a while, and I told him about my panic attacks. I quickly realized that while each of us in the band had his own thing to deal with, Axl's was closest to mine. A sort of chemical imbalance that he had no more control over than I did over my panic attacks. After that, we had an understanding, which made me much more comfortable with the situation. Between growing up in a big family and playing team sports as a kid, I had found it important to come to understandings with the people around me. Axl's unpredictable mood swings also electrified him. A sense of impending danger hung in the air around him. I love that trait in him. Artists are always trying to create a spark, but Axl was totally punk rock in my eyes because his fire could not be controlled. One minute the audience might be comfortably watching him light up the stage. The next instance he became a terrifying wildfire, threatening to burn down not just the venue, but the entire city. He was brazen and unapologetic, and his edge helped sharpen the band's identity and separate us from the pack. We rehearsed at the space twice a day, regardless of anything else going on in any of our lives. Many of the songs that made up Appetite and Lies, as well as more than a few from Use Your Illusion, came together in this back alley lair. When any 2 or 3 of us were together, there were always song ideas percolating. Our disparate musical voices somehow managed to mesh. Axl was into Nazareth, Queen, and the Ramones. Slash was the Aerosmith guy. Izzy brought a no-pretense rock vibe. Stones, Faces, New York Dolls, Hanoi Rocks. Steven was a San Fernando Valley metal guy with a soft spot for the soaring harmonies of the 1960s vocal music. I brought in more of a funkier groove stuff and the punk rock ferocity. Another key was the way we could be completely open with one another while working on songs. Writing songs is a highly emotional thing. Working on them in a group exposes you to others. Either you hold back or you risk feeling vulnerable. But the closeness in our band fostered intimacy. We weren't afraid to expose our ideas and to have the rest of the band tweak them, kick them around, repurpose them or not. That comfort level helped us all work together to create great songs. And nobody was holding on to stuff for another day or another band either. This was the band. This was the moment. We were also learning how to write lyrics, especially Izzy, Axl, and me. And as we developed songs, we put a lot of emphasis on anything that veered away from the main melody. We all felt that diverging from a good tune was only justifiable if the other part was just as good. That meant we rejected cookie-cutter songwriting that demanded bridges for bridges' sake and strictly delineated between verses and choruses. Instead, we only went places we really felt strong about. There's a reason the codas in songs like Rocket Queen, Paradise City, or Patience sound so distinctive. We didn't feel compelled to add them. We were just so excited about certain ideas that, working together day after day, we found ways to incorporate them. We wrote Sweet Child of Mine later, and the "Where do we go now?" coda of that song actually just sort of tacked on, which is one of the reasons we didn't anticipate it being a hit, or even a single for that matter. When we started to write the songs that would become Appetite, it was clear that Slash saw this as a chance to finally perfect his sense of melody on leads and his crunch when it came to riffage. Slash wrote and perfected those classic parts from some dark and beautiful place within himself. The shy introvert I had first met had at last found the true medium to express himself. I remember my Michelle coming together. Slash had a great riff, a typical Slash riff. It was a slinky, spidery thing, but he was playing it really fast at first. His initial riff shows up slow down in the intro of the recorded version, that brooding, eerie horror movie bit at the beginning. While working on it together with the whole band, collaboration was the magic ingredient for almost all the songs. We hit on that bump, ba-dam that kick-starts the song in its final version. One of our signature songs from that period had an even longer gestation. Part of it went back to the very first song I ever wrote. Now in LA, 7 years later, the main riff from that first song came back to me as we were putting together another tune about the hardscrabble lives we had lived. As with My Michelle, one of Slash's amazing chiming staccato riffs became the intro, and the main section of the song hurtled along atop the riff from my Vain song, The Fake, now played on bass. Axl had some lyrical fragments he had been working on since the Seattle trip, and we created an extended bridge around those. A dreamlike section echoing the words, "When you're high," devolved into a churning, nightmarish wash of sound out of which Axl howled, "Do you know where you are?" We called the result, "Welcome to the Jungle." We played the song live for the first time when we opened at the Troubadour on a Thursday night in late June 1985. Also on the bill was a band originally from San Francisco called Jet Boy. Jungle went over great, and from then on, crowds would get agitated as soon as they heard Slash's intro riff. It became one of our first calling cards. We also hit it off with Jet Boy. I had an immediate connection with Jet Boy bass player Todd Crew. He was so smart that I truly believe he had to drink to slow down the inflow of information to his brain. I also understood without asking that he was self-medicating some deep pain. But Todd was also funny. He was always the life and light in the room. We quickly became best friends. I hadn't even been in LA for even a year yet, and I was still very conscious of being away from home, away from my family, and from my boyhood friends. It's difficult to describe how much this early friendship with Todd, which almost immediately became a hangout all the time kind of friendship, meant to me. Todd, together with the guys within Guns, formed part of a new foundation for me, like a family, and we had fun. Todd was a heavy drinker, often passing out at the most inopportune times. Clubs, apartments, hallways, sidewalks, whatever. It's also difficult to express the level of excitement I felt as I saw the number of people who were into our music explode. Within a few months, we went from playing to a handful of people to packing some of the coolest venues in town. When things were working and you're seeing progress, it kicks major ass, especially since that progress was largely based on new songs we continued to write together. The next time my brother Matt played with us, a few months after the time he looked out and saw an empty club, people knew the songs and were singing along. I could see the relief in Matt's face. Not that it was a completely steady upward trajectory. We still played a lot of random gigs. The night after we unveiled Jungle at the Troubadour, we played a UCLA frat house. We got $35 and free beer for that show. It was one of those spontaneous gigs. It was set up at the same day we played. The students at the frat party weren't sure what to make of us and hung back a little. Axl's assless chaps may have had something to do with our tepid reception to still free beer. Obviously, we still had to work other jobs. Stephen was the only one of us who was not working. He had been kicked out of his house when he was 12 and learned early how to make his way on the streets. But he was completely unselfish. If he scrounged up the money for a hamburger or a bag of Cheetos, he would share it with me or any of the other guys, no matter how hungry he was. Slash worked at a newsstand in the corner of Melrose and Fairfax called Centerfield News. Lucky for us, the stand had a phone. Slash routinely left Centerfold's phone number with bookers and club promoters. He would sometimes be on the phone his entire shift trying to get us gigs, calling people on the mailing list to sell tickets, spreading the word about shows. Slash was a natural-born salesman. When it came to getting people to buy tickets for our show, eventually he got fired from the newsstand because he was on the phone so much. I was still working for the mobsters of indeterminate East European origin transporting office supplies. At first, I found the guys who ran the company pretty intimidating. They were right out of Central Casting, heavy-looking features, unidentifiable accents, and a clipped way of talking, tracksuits with pistols in the waist of their pants. The whole situation made me wary. But they were really cool to me. It was steady work, and after I'd been there for half a year, I felt like part of the team. Maybe that's why I tried to get Izzy a job at the same company. He ended up in the one room where they really did sell office supplies over the phone. He came in late his third day, and one of the bosses took me aside. Mikey, even my mom had called me Duff, but these guys used the name of my driver's license, Michael. Mikey, your friend. He no good. Your friend. He on drugs. Another guy who worked there with me was a white guy named Black Randy, who lived in the LA punk band Black Randy and the Metro Squad. He was insane. Shot speedballs all day at work, but somehow the bosses liked him enough to keep him around. Black Randy loved our band. He always told us, I'm going to manage your band and you'll have the swagger of the New York Dolls and you're going to on this town. He took the bus down to our rehearsal space and brought children's Halloween costumes he wanted us to wear. He videotaped us and videotaped himself shooting speedballs. I guess it goes without saying that he became our first manager, obviously. But Black Randy also had AIDS and he died soon afterward. After that, I called my brother Bruce, who was booking bands and DJs for a restaurant chain. Dude, do you know any managers? I asked him. Yeah, I can call a buddy of mine, he said. He called me back. The guy wasn't interested. I had broken up with Kat and moved out of the El Cerrito apartment by then. Some nights I crashed at a girl's place near our rehearsal space. Some nights I spent at the space itself. The same was true for the other guys. We bounced around, hooked up with stripper friends. Those girls always had apartments and money, or crashed in the alley off Gardner where, as Izzy told a local paper a few months later, we lived like rats in a box. Each member of the band now existed solely to write and play, and almost all of their concerns had melted away. In my case, this was one of the few periods of my life where I didn't have a fixed address. It was an amazing rite of passage. The camaraderie within Guns N' Roses deepened to a level so unquestioning and intense that it can only be compared to blood relationships. It was primordial, and as when the first creatures began to slither out of the primordial ooze, it can get messy. The clap was absolutely rampant back then, and venereal diseases swept through the band members' crotches while we were all living in such close proximity. Fortunately, since my last experience, I had gotten a tip from one of my brothers-in-law who was a doctor. You could get dirt cheap antibiotics, intended for use in aquariums at pet stores. Turned out tetracycline wasn't just good for tail rot and gill disease. It also did great with syphilis, and with no doctor visit, no expensive prescription, and no need to feign shame for the nuns at a free clinic like I had at that time in Seattle, who needed health insurance when there were pet stores. Well, that's the end of Chapter 13. Let me know what you thought of Chapter 13 in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.